Well, I finally got to drive a car on a racetrack, but not a race car. I took a four-cylinder station wagon, but it was still a lot of fun, and I'll fill you in with how it went. So our closest track with a road course is Spokane Raceway, and they occasionally have track days. And looking at the way it's advertised, I was a little confused because it's motorcycles and cars, and since I know this car wasn't going to be real fast, I was worried with being around motorcycles who actually are fast. And so we went up to Spokane Swap Meet. It happened to be on the same weekend. We did that, and we drove over to take a look at the track. And there's not a huge amount of people there. Everyone was pretty friendly, explained what was going on and kind of how to proceed. So we decided to haul the car up the next day. So for the most part, I knew the car was ready to go be put on a track, but there was a slight vibration in the brakes through the steering wheel, so front brake rotors were warped slightly. So decided to tackle that after a day of walking around the swap meet. So I was up fairly late. So the rotors were EBC braked, and red pads is what I had on there, which is kind of their little higher performance street pad. And the front, of course, looked really good other than the warped rotors. Really good thickness to the pads. The rear of the pads were actually quite thin, but the rotors weren't warped. I still turned them, and which was good because there was actually quite a bit of rust on them. The downside with a manual transmission car in a snowy area is, well, you don't use the brakes, and because all the snow and de-icer, things rust, and that's part of what took out the rear pads is just the rust on the rotors. And you know, I guess maybe I should have an automatic so I use the brakes more. Yeah, we actually hauled the car up. Father-in-law decided to go with, so we all climbed in his truck, big enough cab and nice trailer. But the reason we hauled it up is it's a fairly long drive to get up to the track, and I didn't like the idea of trying to figure out how to come home if something broke by hauling the car up. Well, I guarantee I can come home. So in Spokane Raceway, they actually offered an instructor, so I took that option, and that was a great choice to actually take it. At first, I just rode in. Well, at first he walked me through the course. We are looking at it, a map of it, describing our racing line through it, and then rode in his car around the track quite a few times, but got real familiar with the race line. And then the next step of it is I ended up following him out on the track and just tried to stay on his tail and make sure I'm doing the line right and following all the procedures. And then when he was comfortable enough with that, he let me go in front. And then after that, I just saw him occasionally during the day to see how things are going. Yeah, but definitely take the option of an instructor when it's offered. They know the course. I had never been around this track, and there's a couple tight turns and kind of interesting ways you want to set up the car to get through quicker. let's face it, the real question is how does a station wagon do on a road course? And in this particular case, being an Audi, it really wasn't too bad. Um, Basically, was wide open throttle the whole time. Well, if you're not braking, just because this is just a little turbo four-cylinder, way underpowered compared to the other cars that were there. I mean, there was a ACR Viper, some high-end Corvettes, a NASCAR's type pickup. And of course the motorcycles. And that was one thing I didn't clarify earlier, is I found out there's 3 different groups that Spokane Raceway does. You have a experience class, those are usually the fast cars, experienced drivers. You have an entry level, usually the slower cars, less experienced drivers, and they might bounce people between just depending on skill level or car capability. And then the motorcycles have the track to themselves, which is great because those guys get to really utilize that track. I'm not that much into motorcycles, but I bet you this track is a lot of fun on a motorcycle. So yeah, Spokane Raceway is 2.4 mile road course, and they have a shorter course. I don't think they have it listed online how long that is. So in the morning we were running the long course, and afternoon I got one session into that before we left to go home, and that one about mid-track it cuts off, so you don't have as long any real long straight on the short course. But both tracks are actually a lot of fun to do, and just all this little car could do. Yeah, I was more worried about getting run over than anything. This is 3,300-pound car with a 150 horsepower engine. Not a great combination, but since this thing can put down all of its power as soon as you want it with the all-wheel drive, and the suspension system is actually really good on these cars, it didn't do too bad. Corvette that kind of played a little bit back and forth. I mean, he had more than enough power to get past me in a straight, but I could catch up a little bit in the corners, just ever so little bit. But too many straights, he would still get away. But yeah, a lot of the cars I could keep up with in the corners, and darn near everyone walked away from me in the straights. The afternoon session there was a Volkswagen, so yeah, they were fairly well matched. I mean, not a lot of power in either one. He probably is running the same engine, a little less suspension than I have, and it was a front-wheel drive. A little embarrassing I didn't catch him, but yeah. So yeah, the Volkswagen driver was either completely nuts or extremely skilled in showing what he can do with a car that's not quite up to par. It's more than once I saw that Volkswagen go into a corner so hard that lifted one of his rear wheels and locked it up. A little bit of smoke coming off the tire, but would still hold it on the track. But yeah, the car did great. I could go out, run the entire 20-minute session, which is what each group is allotted. Start to finish, just keep doing laps and not have a lick of trouble. And that's more than I could say for a number of the cars that were there. And this is back to, leave a car alone. This one here is barely modified, and everything is very minor, so it's on the modification, so it's pretty close to stock. Gave no issue. I have much better tires than they originally came with. I had better brakes, and other than that, upgraded ignition coils because, the old ones were temperamental and unreliable. And so I'm running the Audi red coils. silicone intake on it just because the other one had a crack. The 710 diverter valve. I mean, they're very minor mods in this car, and made a reliable track day car. Now, I also ran this thing the entire day with even a spare tire in. I didn't empty anything out other than what was already removed because I was going to sell the car. So, spare tire, jack, all the interior, everything was in it. So a track day like this is not a race, and that's why they don't allow passing into corners. You have to drive with windows down, and then in a straight you can signal someone to go by.
I lost him on that one.
In the last session I was out, I had a NASCAR pickup following me, and I knew he had more than enough power to pass, so I had two of the laps I'd signaled more than once, let him by, and he stayed behind me, so I just continued on after that. Well, apparently after Challenger got by both me and the Volkswagen, he decided to pass. And, of course, did that with no problem, except forgot there was a corner and damn near hit the Volkswagen. And just, this is why you still want mirrors on your car. Pay attention. And I think that was a little close, and I'm not sure why that happened that way, if he forgot there was a corner or what. But noticed that after that he went into pits, or was told to go into pits, and yep, never saw him after that. Yeah, one of the thoughts was I'm taking this Audi up. Now it's 175,000 mile car that I used to baby, and then drive the wheels off of it till I blow up the engine. So you'd think that wouldn't take too long, and well, the car didn't try to overheat. Oil temperature was warm, but not in any level that Audi says is bad. And the fact that Audi put a oil temperature gauge on the dash tells you that's a normal problem for these cars. So if you have a gauge put in there, you probably need to pay attention to it. So downside to taking a stock car to a track day is, well, you gotta have the windows down, and this has the factory exhaust. Even with the windows down, you still barely hear this engine. So more than once I was right against the rev limiter. Just, you don't have that nice feedback of hearing it. So you got to be paying attention to what gear you're in for a couple of these corners, and so I think that's something I'll have to change. So car's still running. In fact, drove it onto the trailer and drove it off when we got home. And in fact, I've went and picked up some stuff with it. I still have it street legal. Well, obviously it's still pretty much stock, but it's still licensed and insured. And so the next step will actually be putting on some new rear brake pads and fix a cracked brake line in the front, and maybe open up the exhaust a little bit so I can actually hear it. And if you'd like to see how the car does next time around, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.